Hello and welcome to Top Story. The Cold War is over. US President George W. Bush proclaimed at the NATO summit in Bucharest on Wednesday, and Russia is not our enemy. He'll hope that Vladimir Putin, who's attending the summit himself, was listening closely, because the NATO-Russia relationship is going through a period of turbulence unprecedented since the Soviet Union collapsed. At the heart of the problem, Washington's determination to build an anti-missile defense system in the Czech Republic and Poland. Bush says Europe needs to guard against the possibility in the not-so-distant future of a missile attack from Iran. Vladimir Putin is far from convinced. The real focus of the missile shield, he suspects, is Russia. But despite intense Russian suspicion, there have been signs in recent weeks that differences on the issue may be narrowing. And in Bucharest on Wednesday, Bush called the missile shield an opportunity for unprecedented strategic cooperation between Russia and the NATO alliance. Well, joining me now to discuss the tensions over the missile shield in Bucharest is Suzanne Nice, who's a research fellow at the French Institute of International Relations. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. George W. Bush spoke of an unprecedented, or the possibility of an unprecedented level of cooperation between NATO and Russia. But he must be kidding himself, surely, if he thinks that the missile shield is the way to achieving it.
I'm completely sure about that. I think everybody is thinking Bush is now in his last month and is waiting what is going on in the United States. Mr. Bush will have a decisive defeat in the Bucharest summit. It's more or less clear that only Croatia and Albania are going to be admitted as new members. And so if Russia may have the success of not having Georgia and Ukraine, which is sure already today, maybe there could be some cooperation, but definitely not on the missile shield, but maybe in the interest of becoming a member of WTO. This is in reality the issue behind, that Ukraine is going to be a member of the WTO, and Russia wants to become a member of WTO. The question is, what is the price for getting in? Is the missile shield really necessary? And the cooperation in this issue is not clear yet.
There was talk that there was a sort of behind-the-scenes quid pro quo agreed with Russia that we won't let Georgia and Ukraine get their membership action plans this time round, and in return you'll soften your position on the missile shield. Do you think something like that's been going on?
Yes, but I think there was no big chance really of Georgia and not at all of Ukraine to become members of MAP, because Germany and France are strongly opposing, and other countries as well. So Russia wasn't even necessary to oppose it. Is it really necessary for Russia to cooperate on the missile shield? I think it's not really necessary, but it's like strategic games going on in the vacuum, which is today's situation before the American elections.
There does seem, though, to have been something of a softening of the Russian position in recent weeks. There have been several visits by Robert Gates and by Condi Rice to Moscow, which seem to have got something back in return. But do you feel there's a sort of a movement
from the Russian side? There's no concrete outcome of that. We already had in Azerbaijan these ideas of having some bases in Baku or so. There was no real decision yet over anything. It's more like Sarkozy politics, a lot of announcements and no real outcomes. I think everybody is trying to gain some time to sort of behave as if there were some negotiations. But the Russian position, especially that one of Medvedev, is really to oppose this American project, because they consider it as being directed against Russia, but more in a symbolic sense, being opposed to Russia's more or less imperial sphere.
I suppose part of the problem as far as the Russians is concerned is that although George W. Bush may say that this shield is not directed at Russia, that there will be nothing to stop a future administration in Washington changing the direction of the shield.
Yeah, but it's a defensive shield. I think it's a lot more about the symbol of having such a shield near to the Russian borders. It could be like the Cuba missile crisis, which was nevertheless aggressive in some sense. But for the Russians, it's the expansion of Western influence in their sphere, which is more preoccupying than anything else. That's the mentality of the Americans.
And there's no question, too, that for the Czechs and for the Poles, their main concern is Russia, not Iran.
Yeah, but there was also already a change of position. For example, the Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski, who was a strong neoconservative politician, changed his position since he's Foreign Minister of Poland, and we see changes in Central Europe as well concerning this situation, intermediate situation between West and East, and he doesn't support any longer, as before, the missile shield.
The Americans have been making a big play of the fact that they're trying to persuade the Russians to come on board with the missile shield, saying that they're prepared to go as far as to get the Russians closely involved on the ground in the Czech Republic and Poland. But how far can the Americans go along that road, first of all in terms of security, but also in terms of the opposition that they'll get from the Czechs and the Poles?
Exactly. I don't see any possibility, to be very honest, to get this cooperation to get through. It's completely excluded.
And how seriously, though, do you think the Russians take the claim by the Americans that the real problem here is Iran, that in the not very distant future that Iran genuinely could have missiles which could deliver a bomb to Europe?
The Russians are playing the game, but in reality there's a cooperation, there's a good relationship between Iran and Russia, there's a good relationship between Turkey and Iran. Iran is a partner, economic partner, etc., and they benefit in some senses from the exclusion of the Western Iran trade. But nevertheless, they have to respect for sure, and they respect United Nations positions, and they play the diplomatic game, but they are not ready to go any further, and they don't share this impression of Iran as a very dangerous country and which necessitates.
Although there does seem to have been some growing concern in recent months in Moscow that the Iranians may be developing the technological capacity to deliver a missile over a long distance.
There is some concern, but it is not in a short term. There's no short-term concern. There's no idea of having this kind of threats in the short term.
Given all that, then, do you think there's any possibility whatsoever that Russia could be persuaded to come on board with the missile shield in any form whatsoever?
No,
even if
it's completely excluded. I think there's no possibility.
So George W. Bush is facing not just defeat, you think, on Ukraine and Georgia, but also on the missile shield at this summit in Bucharest.
Yes.
It's a bad way for him to go out, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bad way.
And that, I'm afraid, is all we have time for today. Thanks to our guest, Suzanne Nice. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.